Being here. My name is Chelsea Meadis, and I will be your MC this evening. I want to begin by thanking very much Maple Ridge Community Church for allowing us to use this space, especially on short notice. Thank you for allowing us this conversation and this space to have it in. I would like to start out by recognizing MLA Lawrence Mock. He is from Maple Ridge East. Thank you for coming this evening, MLA Mock. And a few quick housekeeping things. The washrooms are located at the back. The women's is first and the men's is just behind. The emergency exits, I thought I could do like a plane thing, like your emergency exits are here, 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 and here. Your emergency exit may be behind you. Please take a moment if you can to put your phone on silent as well. At the back over here, we have a table with some water and some cookies, but the most important thing on that table over there is we have two petitions if you're interested in signing them. One is on Bill C9, which we're going to be talking about tonight, and also we're going to be talking about the expansion of MAID. So if you have a moment this evening, we would love you to sign those petitions. MLA Dalton will be presenting them in Parliament. Tonight's discussion is about religious freedom, freedom of speech, Bill C9, and the expansion of MAID. There has been a lot of public reaction and strong opinions on these issues, and that's exactly why we are here. We know this can be a heated topic, but tonight is about respectful dialogue. Everyone deserves to have a voice. Whether you support this bill or you oppose it, your perspective matters. We received a lot of questions in advance. We will be addressing some of them tonight, but we won't be able to get through them all. MP Dalton will also be staying after the event to speak with those of you who have a question for him. At the back table, you will also find feedback forms. At the end of the event, we would really like to hear from you. We are always looking to find out what other forums you would like us to have and what you would like your MP to know. So please know that we read every single one of them. At this time, I would like to invite everyone to please stand, if you're able, and remove your hats for O Canada. Thank you, everyone. We are now going to watch a video of MP Mark Dalton speaking about Bill C9 in committee. For context, this bill has passed first and second reading and is currently in committee. It will move to its report stage, then third reading, then the Senate, and finally, and possibly, royal assent. It is important to remember that it is not law until it receives royal assent. It's not over until it's over.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I do appreciate the opportunity just to share a few moments on C9 and the motion and the before us. And as probably most members in the House is happening right now, receiving a lot of correspondence.
I'm just going to check that our Wi-Fi is working. I have a feeling that was a suspicious problem. Hold on. So while we're waiting for that to get going, MP Dalton said to me, okay, so you've got a computer that's going to work, right? Yeah. You should have a backup computer just in case the other computer doesn't work. And I went, absolutely, we're going to test it before you even get there. So sure enough, we're going to have a technical difficulty when we have a backup plan and a plan. So just give us a moment. It's a very passionate, I think it's about 10, 12 minutes. And I think it's a very moving speech about C9, and you can just tell the passion that MP Dalton has about this piece of legislation.
The tools that it needs to prosecute those who promote hate and genocide. It already has hate and genocide. Out. Thank you very much, Chair, and I do appreciate the opportunity just to share a few moments on C9 and the motion and the before us. And as probably most members in the House is happening right now, receiving a lot of correspondence. People that are very concerned about this bill. Canadians from coast to coast that are quite often, not really thinking about politics and about the impact upon their own lives as much as we might be wishing they were. They're writing, they're saying, how is this going to impact me? And I would say I'm quite concerned about the bill before us. I know that's the reason why we have the motion. Just an important fact is that the government legislation already has the tools that it needs to prosecute those who promote hate and genocide. It already has the tools that it needs to prosecute those who promote hate and genocide. I see this bill as politics. Surprise. And bad politics. And bad for Canadians. It's hard to believe that this legislation before us is here in Canada. We've been known as a country, as a beacon of freedom. People from all over the world have immigrated here. And this seems quite contrary to the values of freedom, of faith, of expression that we have had over generations. So this is an extremely important bill. And for me, it really reminds me of the direction of other states that have, I would say, banned scriptures, different scriptures. I think of countries like China in the past under Mao, communist Russia, communist regimes. Scriptures were banned. I actually have some friends that were involved in smuggling. Smuggling not drugs, not arms, smuggling Bibles into the former East Bloc communist countries, where people would be imprisoned, people would be tortured for their faith, for having a Bible. Now, it moved in other countries like China later on. They said, okay, well, you know what, you can have the Bible, but here's what you can believe, or here's what you can say. You take off this section and this section and this section and this section. Tell me what is the difference here that was before us, Mr. Chair? You don't have to, that's a rhetorical question. Okay. This is the same direction. And I think we need to talk about direction before us. This is a bad direction, whether you are a person of faith that is Christian or Muslim or Jewish, or even a secular, because you know we're talking about fundamental rights for all Canadians. And it's something I think we shouldn't be going in this direction. Now, personally, I'm a Christian. Okay, my faith is fundamental to who I am. It's much more important to me than being a parliamentarian. And it informs everything about the direction and values. It's a light upon me. It's personal. And this motion before us talks about it expands, saying, hey, this needs to be more than just the faith. It needs to talk about beliefs and your conscience, these things. So this is like King David said that it's a light to our path. It shines inside of me in the sense that exposes things that I need to make changes in personally, even as a politician. Just as a variety of things, it shines. And I think that we just need to reflect here, as a society, as a government, as the House of Commons, as parliamentarians, about the contributions, and I'll make reference here specifically to Christians, of just the contributions of the faith, the Judeo-Christian faith, and I know there obviously others can speak to other faiths, but the contribution to society, to the very foundation of who we are as a nation. And yes, there's blemishes. People are people. I don't care what faith you subscribe to. But at the same time, you look at the importance of the Christian faith in terms of education. I was a teacher for many years and taught socials and history and looked at medieval Europe and just the importance of for example, the monastic schools, where there was no education of the training of the system of our hospital system. Think of Red Cross, that comes from a faith background. Florence Nightingale. I think of Salvation Army. Probably the other members met with the Salvation Army when they're here on the Hill recently, talking about the influence that they've had, what the giving they've had as far as helping those that are in need, emergency services. It's amazing the work that they do. And from a secular, non-religious point of view, I think we all would say this is very commendable. But they're very clear, and they say it comes from a faith position of service. And I think that what is core, and this is what the challenge that I would say Christians feel. I think Christians feel like they're a punching bag, and what's so important to realize that so many of our perspective as a culture has come from a Christian foundation. Even the equality, for example, of men and women, that was not something that has always been there. But in the scriptures, it talks about no such thing as man and woman in a sense, not in biological sense, but in terms of equality before God. So it's always been a source of equality. I would say even those that can say they might be feminists. Some of that might come from even from a biblical perspective, in the sense that the equality, not subjugated under men, but equal, and that isn't everywhere. And then I think about the whole issue of slavery. Christians involved in that. To think of Wilberforce in the British Parliament, decade after decade, bringing legislation in order to stop slavery, and finally successful. And there's a song we've all heard, I'm sure. You hear it with the bagpipes. What comes to mind? Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, written by John Newton in the 1700s. He was a slave trader involved in trade and capturing slaves in Africa, or in the transportation from there to the New World, imprisoning them, shackling them, the terrible things. And what happened to his life? What happened to him? You read the song. What does it say? Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Sorry. That saved a wretch like me. And I guess I'm choked up, because it's not just him, it's me. It really is. We all need saving. As far as I'm concerned. Sorry, I just put that out there. It says, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. And you see the transformation of his life. The transformation of his life from someone that is that position as a slave trader, as an evil person, and able to be transformed. And that's the message, I would say, of Jesus Christ, of the Bible. And that's the difference that made in me personally, and I'm speaking personally. There's a verse I said this verse was made very much alive to me. I was in the military, it was in my uniform, and a verse that you probably may be familiar with. And the verse is what? The verse says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son," that's Jesus Christ, "that whoever believes in him won't perish but have everlasting life." And that can just roll off. But to me it struck, and I saw, you know what? He didn't just die for the world, he died for me. And it wasn't say, well, because I was doing this bad or that terrible. It was more maybe my attitude of selfishness, everything around me. And I guess that motivated me and motivates Christians and people of faith to realize that I'm here not to give, just to give and under my own, just accumulating wealth and accumulating experiences, but I'm here to serve our community, our country. And I think that we're all here for that, right? We're here to serve our country. We're here to serve people. And that's what the word minister, you heard the cabinet minister, minister. We're there to minister, to serve. And so that touched me in my life and transformed me when I was still an adolescent, and has been directional in my whole entire life. And I can understand that, you look at the scriptures, and the scriptures were written over, we're talking 3,000, 4,000 years, a long time. And in a lot of different cultures. And we can look back and say, well, this here doesn't fit in and that doesn't fit in. But there's cultural, there's generational, there's a lot of things, and it really does come together. And again, as a Christian, I would say this, that it says that it's summed up in all one word. And it says God is love. In 1 John, it talks about that God is love, not just filling up, but his whole heart. His whole heart, even in his regulations, even the rules, everything he has for mankind, even the structures, is out of love. And Christians, there's Old Testament and New Testament, don't just we believe it's a whole, but Christ does clarify it right there. He says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye. But I say to you what? If someone slaps you on the cheek, turn to him the other cheek. And if someone persecutes you, then don't return evil, but return good for evil. And so I'm saying that's transformative. That's transformative. And for us as politicians with our laws, with C9, to say, well, this has to, take this out, take this in. There's actually a lot of correction within the scriptures itself. Not correction, but Christ explains a lot of that. And so I guess what I'm saying here, members of the committee, thank you for your patience and not making your interventions in this time. Which I know, just to take some thought and realize, let's pull back on this. Let's just pull back on this. And with my colleague friends from Quebec, I get it. My mom's French Canadian. I've lived in Quebec, and je sais l'influence de l'Église pendant des siècles, et aussi que c'était vraiment difficile. Donc il y a parmi beaucoup une résistance, je comprends. Parce que le clergé était tellement forte et on ne veut pas ça, on veut la liberté. Je comprends ça. Mais la chose, c'est que il y a des équilibres. Il y a des équilibres. Et je crois vraiment qu'il doit avoir une place de liberté, et on a les lois déjà il est déjà là, c'est suffit. Donc, j'encourage qu'on ne continue pas avec ce projet de loi. Merci beaucoup.
That was quite moving. Thank you for your patience, and I'm listening. It's very important. At this time, I would like to bring up Carly. Carly is going to introduce MP Mark Dalton. Carly's a family friend of the Daltons. She'll share a brief introduction before MP Dalton speaks.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight for this very important conversation. My name is Carly Fetishin, and I have known Mark and Marlene for, I think, more than 25 years. I worked with Mark when he was over in the MLA office back in 2009, and I'm now working with him in his MP office. It is my pleasure to introduce Member of Parliament Mark Dalton. Mark comes from a proud military family where commitment to country and community was a strong part of his upbringing. He served as a communication reservist with the Canadian Armed Forces. Before entering politics, Mark spent many years as a teacher here in School District 42, both the secondary and the elementary levels. He has a BA in French and History and a Master's in Educational Leadership at SFU. He served as a member of the Legislative Assembly for Maple Ridge and Mission for 8 years, and then in 2019, Mark became Member of Parliament for Pitt Meadows Maple Ridge. He's been elected 3 times to represent our communities. He is the BC chair of the Conservative Caucus, and he's brought forward legislation on crime and on the overdose crisis. Mark and his wife Marlene, who many of you recognize from our monthly newsletters, have raised 3 grown children, and they are now proud grandparents. They met when they served together in a non-denominational Christian ministry that did outreach in inner cities, schools, and on campuses. Family and community have always been at the center of Mark's work and public service. And I can say that Mark is someone who genuinely cares about people and making a positive difference in our nation. I think that was very evident from the things he shared. I've had the privilege of seeing lives change for the better because of the work that Mark has done. So today's forum reflects a commitment to keeping engaged with the community. And I would like you to please join me in welcoming our Member of Parliament, Mark Dalton.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Chelsea. And thank you, everyone, for coming here this evening. It's just glad to be here. And this really is about you. It's about your concerns. It's about your how you feel about Canada, your place in it, our children, our grandchildren. And this is an important issue that I've heard a lot from constituents, from residents. And so it's, that's why I brought it forward. It's important. And you don't necessarily, not everybody agrees, as was mentioned, Chelsea mentioned, and that's fine. If you're here and you don't see, well, what's the big deal about this bill? What is, I don't see any problem with it. Well, maybe hopefully during this presentation we can maybe answer some questions, and with others also. But I will say that, a lot of you are wondering, well, what can I do? Well, you're doing something right now. You're here. And that is something. It's actually important to me when I'm in Parliament that I can say that I have that sense that the community is there, or many people are there. This is an important issue for you. So I want to say thank you, and to each and every one of you that are here tonight for making that effort on a rainy evening, for coming, for taking that stand. And sometimes you think, well, I'm only one person. But you make a difference. You make a difference. What's the famous Dutch, I'm going off script, but the Dutch story about the boy that put his finger in the dike? Yeah, and held it all. I only got one finger, young boy, but held the dike from, that's a good fable, is it? Or is it true? MP Jansen, it's a good fable, but that's the point. We may only have a finger, but you can put your finger in that dike, and it all makes the difference. And as was mentioned, I was in the military. For some time, I was raised up in a military home, so that's my background. I like a video game, but my video game I like was made in 1996, and it's a strategy game, and it's a war game, and so I'm always into strategy. But one thing in the military is you got to do your job. You got to do your post. Stand up wherever you're at. You might not. You're not in my position, but you're in your position, with your family, with your connections, with whatever. So, we all have a role, an important role in our society, in where we're at. It all makes a difference. And so, so it generated a lot of interest. We got a lot of emails and some chatter on Facebook. Some of it is a little bit, But, I recognize that's, one of the things commenting me had me in a dress and my legs. And I said, what? I think that's AI. And because I got hairier legs than that. So, I'm not, so don't believe everything you saw, So it's, but, I would say that, I'm not trying to force my religion upon you, my values upon you. Sometimes I hear that. That's not it. I think that we are in a pluralistic society, but this discussion that we're having here this evening is not just about the religious people, on the margin. It really is. It impacts every single person, and in this country that so many people have fought and died for. How many here have got parents, grandparents that have fought in the war, that fought one of the wars? Yeah, they on the beaches, far over there, they fought. And you forget these sort of things. It's easy to forget. It's easier to take things for granted, isn't it? Just take things for granted. I was talking to my stepmother tonight, and this afternoon, and she's having real trouble hearing. She gets about 1/3 about what I'm saying. And you take, maybe some of you also have hearing issues right there. That's okay, but you're hearing. And she's losing her sight. She can't see very well, so it's really troubling. And there's so many things that you take for granted until wow, I didn't realize how important that was. Be able to walk, be able to talk, be able to breathe, be able to do this, or be able to, it's just so many things. And I think that attitude of thankfulness is really important. I think that's really important. It's actually really healing. I'm off here, but if it is, it's really healing that whole area of thankfulness. And, one thing that is so important is the area of freedoms. And so, we just take these things for granted, these freedoms that we do have, until and what's happening, they're slowly eroding. And what's going on here? What you're slowly eroding, and we're seeing that happening in our nation. And so it's a big deal. So C9, just a summary. If you read C9, you go online, you read it. It's like, what's the big deal? well, there are a couple issues. I'll go through a couple of the points, and then but the thing is, what the bill that was presented it isn't that big of a deal, not too big of a deal, as is, okay? It's just what was put in at committee stage. So some people get a little complicated. What's going on? I thought this was passed. It's so confusing. So there's a whole step. You introduce a bill, that's step one, okay, sorry, first reading, then you have second reading discussion, then it goes to committee, then it goes from committee to, and then it goes to third reading, and then it goes to Senate, and they go through the whole thing, and then it comes back, and then there's a lot of steps to passing a bill, okay? So here's a couple things. Bill C9, the first part was repealing the requirement that the Attorney General consent to the proceedings for hate propaganda offenses. I was reading that today, and I thought, that raised a flag, okay? And why was that? They want to take the Attorney General from being able to have their say. Do you guys know anybody, an Attorney General that got a lot of, I wouldn't call it fame and really stood up as an Attorney General? Do you know, anybody know it rings a bell for me. Does SNC Lavalin ring a bell? Okay. Does Jody Wilson-Raybould ring a bell? Okay, well, Jody Wilson-Raybould, she became she was concerned about the political influence of the current government in the justice system. That Justin Trudeau was accused of pressuring Jody Wilson-Raybould from not going along with kind of turning a blind eye to corruption. So removing that piece. So I'm just saying this is just kind of not even the main topic, but just that one piece is a concerning. It's like less accountability. We don't believe in less accountability. I'm a Conservative member of Parliament. We believe in more accountability. Being accountable, not, because with no accountability comes corruption. And corruption, well, it's just $1 million a year, $1 billion. You wouldn't believe, it's just like, my goodness, there's corruption. There is corruption. And the current government, Big L, there is the budget officer, parliamentary budget officer that was this. He was a bit too much heavy on the budget. Like he really focused on it, did his job. Well, they decided he's just an interim. Okay, well, thank you very much. Goodbye. We're going to find a budget officer that does what we want him to do. And so it's like that's sort of the accountability that's a concern. And then another thing about, as far as we've seen that the current government doesn't have a history of prioritizing the rights and freedoms and shunning accountability. I don't know if you following this at all, as far as the Federal Court of Appeal in January, just last month, in the implementation of the Emergencies Act, okay? So the implementation, it basically was a second time, it was a federal court, and it upheld the 2024 ruling that said that the use of this act, basically with the truckers, okay? Now, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to talk about truck, it's COVID, it's this was a political thing, but you know what? It says it's unconstitutional and infringed on freedom of expression and protection against unreasonable search and seizure. Like it's been ruled, and guess what? The last day, I think yesterday, they said, well, they're going to appeal it again. So this is the sort of things that we're dealing with. Why not? Because they're using power in the wrong way. They're using power in the wrong way. Don't agree with that at all. So then it continues, this bill. Talks about willfully promoting hatred, okay. They're going to create an offense that where if a person's stopping anybody else from going to church or a religious or place of worship, that'll be an offense. But the only thing is, guess what? It's already the law. So it's like the things that are good that we agree with, a lot of it's a law, and some of these things are watering it down. But so the Conservatives, what do? We voted for it to go to committee stage. In a committee stage, you bring amendments and you can try to improve it. Well, they didn't improve it with one of their amendments, okay, and that's why we're here. And the Bloc Québécois brought forward an amendment that's not in the original C9, and it removes good faith religious expression. And the Liberals, we're going to talk about that, okay? So remove that. So good faith religious expression. In other words, talking about, so this was brought forward. There was actually a protection in the original hate crime bills, hate propaganda bill by Pierre Trudeau. Trudeau number 1, okay? So, but that was actually is okay. I mean, in the sense that they're trying to make sure that religious communities, preachers, priests, teachers, Bible school teachers, hey, just general citizens, that when you're good faith talking about things in the Bible, because a lot of Christians, okay, believe that probably majority believe that what the scriptures teaches is that's the truth. Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and life." And it's like, okay, well, government can have its opinion, but this is the truth. That's what we're standing by. And so it was meant, but that's just not just Christians. It's also the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Hindu, all the different communities. It was a clause to protect the faith communities from good faith expression. In other words, to be able to talk about from the scriptures the incitement to violence has always been illegal. And that's what they're saying. Oh, we're going to stop the incitement to violence. Well, guess what? That's already illegal. You can't use your religious, good faith religious expression as a way to try to incite violence on certain people. That's wrong. That's criminal already. This is not. So, but what this does is still undermine religious freedoms and rights. And it's not just religious. It's our rights as Canadians. And so it's quite concerning. Now, the Justice Committee chair at the time was Mark Miller, okay? And he openly said that different scriptures should be criminalized. In Deuteronomy, in Leviticus, in Romans, he said, you're talking about this, they should be criminalized. So that's problematic if you believe the Bible, and that's where some of these issues come on issues of sexuality. Okay, that's where it really touches. But was Mark Carney reprimanded? Was he reprimanded? Raise your hands. You believe he was reprimanded? No one raised their hands. Was by the Liberals, by the Prime Minister? Was he reprimanded? No. Was he rewarded? Do you think he was rewarded? Yes, he was rewarded. And you know what his reward was? I'm not saying specifically about that, okay? But I'm just saying they have 120 other members of Parliament that are Liberals that they could have given this cabinet post that Chrystia Freeland. There was an opening for one cabinet post, and who did they give that cabinet post to? 2 weeks after he's making these comments, Mr. Mark Miller. He's the one. And what do they give the? What is his ministerial position? His ministerial position is the Minister for Canadian Identity and Culture, and official minister responsible for official languages. So I had questions with him in official languages, and I was asking about the same sort of thing, and he's firm in this position of the hate laws. You know something? They changed it from Minister of Canadian Heritage to Minister of Canadian Identity. Is that interesting? It is a little bit interesting. I think it's interesting. I was a history teacher and French. Okay. And the Liberal government, bless their hearts, trying to be Christian. I am a Christian right there, but part of our job is to point out things, okay? Has not shown much interest in promoting our heritage. That has made us the country that we are, bringing people from all over the world here, and look at the attitudes towards statues, the famous Johnny MacDonald and others. A Jewish woman that I'm in a group, anyways, she's secular, she posted 25 scripture verses in Parliament. I didn't know about that. all over the parliament, there are different windows that have scripture verses. I'm not going to give you 25, but I'll give you 3. Where there is no vision, the people perish. That's Proverbs 29:18. Where's no vision? And I think the vision, I believe, can come from God. Yeah, I believe that vision, that's part of it. That's what Christians believe, okay? Non-Christians might not believe that. Another one, Nehemiah 1:7. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. The Lord's good. A stronghold in the day of trouble. I've experienced that. A stronghold. And then this one here, Psalm 72:8. He shall have dominion from sea to sea. And many of you heard the story about that. He shall have, talking about God will have dominion from sea to sea. We used to be called the Dominion of Canada. And that referred to God and to he has dominion. There used to be, and the other nations took their name from, I believe, the Dominion of Australia. There are other places that did take that title, Dominion. And I'm not saying that have to be a Christian to be Canadian at all. This is a free society where people can practice different faiths or not practice any faith. That's not the point of this conversation right here. But it's to recognize that it's not just identity right now, but it's heritage. Looking back, and I talked about that in the video, a lot of our heritage comes from a Judeo-Christian background, a foundation. And, there was a, talk about separation of church and state. That's actually American. It's not Canadian. And it wasn't a separation as in church, as in people, state and religion, or people within, speaking to it, or people of faith being involved. It was more the official churches. That's the whole thing, the official church. It wasn't an official church of the government. So, but, here's something else. More than history, we're talking about history, it's also in the charter. The first words are, whereas Canada is founded on the principles of the sovereignty of God and the rule of law. That's the first words in the Canadian Charter. And in Section 2, it says the fundamental rights include freedom of conscience, religions, thought, belief, expression, peace, press, peaceful assembly, and association. Look at what we sang, O Canada. O Canada, God keep our land glorious and free. Okay, so it's entwined. But then there's also, it's very strong, the freedom of speech is very strong in the American Constitution. Okay, they're very strong about this. It's almost like an absolute right, that says the Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, no law, except for when it comes to direct incitement to violence, fraud, or defamation. Canada isn't, if you look in the Charter in Section 2, the rights are not absolute. It's not quite as clear as the Americans are. They've got 10 amendments. And can be subject to, in the Charter it says, reasonable limits prescribed by law that are demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Well, the only problem is that leaves room for interpretation. And so right now there is a strong current, okay, well, this is reasonable to clamp your rights, because this is justifiable, these other rights. So I'm saying that there is a pull. And if us as opposition, if you just kind of say, oh yeah, okay, there's a tendency, not just a tendency, there's a real, certain parties seem to be driven with legislation, like the online anti-hate laws, all these different things to actually to erode your rights. So, I talk to people from the East Bloc countries, going door to door. Poland, Czech Republic, and many, variety of countries. And, they tell me, this is what's happened in Canada, and they can smell the difference. They want to go back. They sense that erosion happening. And now this isn't meant to just make you discouraged, okay? I don't want to try to do that, but I think it's important to be informed, to hear where is the situation at. And so, I just think right now of Iran, talking about freedoms. There are tens of thousands, maybe tens of thousands in January that were killed for wanting to be able to express themselves, be able to not have to wear the hijab, the different things. So you see that type of erosion. I spoke at two Iranian, well, different times, but last night, one in West Vancouver and one in Coquitlam, and they just want that freedom from that repression. And so here's the thing is that, we have a responsibility as Canadian citizens to do our part for our children and grandchildren to protect these freedoms. There's a saying, the first domino of freedom is religious freedoms, because it protects conscience and helps other freedoms to exist. For example, freedom of speech. We can't safely express our beliefs without freedom of conscience, freedom of assembly. Faith communities are in places like this where that values, morals, and the heart and spiritual issues are brought forward. Political participation, conscience guides, voting, and civic responsibility. So protecting religious freedom is protecting the foundation of liberty itself. It's really important. Those of you that came here not feeling that way, it's really important for everyone's freedoms, and we can. So it's I'm just going to go a little. I think of here's something else is that democracy depends on voters being able to hear competing ideas and to express their opinions. It's really important. I need to be able to talk about things in a respectful manner, not in a non-profane manner, but just to be able to talk about these things, and we have a response to bring these things out. I think because there's a lot of, there's been a lot of many ideas that were unacceptable at one time become acceptable, both negative and positive, but issues that were unpopular or controversial, women's rights, for example, civil rights, voting. These were all very controversial, but it was speaking up against these things, and that there was change. And we need to be able to speak up on different issues that are currently before us. And there are a lot of issues. This is one issue right now. So I think of solidarity in Lech Walesa in Poland, and how they a lot of times there's a cost. Many of them, died, but they stood up and they actually saw the East Bloc countries become free. And then you look at countries where religious freedom is suppressed. China, Iran, North Korea, where they heavily control also speech, media, and political debate. So that's not the type of country that I want to see, and I don't think it's a country that anyone wants to see where you had that repression. So just a few things right here, and then I'm going to ask my next guest here. I think some of the things are to be informed, just to be informed. Find out information. To engage, it doesn't mean to be consumed, because some of these things can be consuming right there, and it can be depressing. So you kind of monitor. It can affect your mental health, I think. There's only so much you can do, right? So it doesn't mean I just can't handle this. You can, but email, phone, you can do email better. So that you're supportive of certain things. But even especially the MPs that are taking stands against where you believe. To speak up, that's important. I would suggest in this area, if there's some liberal MPs, I'd suggest doing that. I think that petitions, we got some petitions here. Please take a moment to sign. I will present those. Support on social media. Okay, well, that doesn't mean you have to be, like I said, all the time, monitor your time on social media. I mean, it can be addictive, but you know what? Like me, yay, or don't like me. Well, if you don't like me, then don't, but just, share the word, share, or other people that help getting that word, because you know what? You impact the logarithms, okay? And so what that does is it actually helps other people to see, even if it helps others, so share and read. If you find something, doesn't mean you have to do everyone, but if you can do that, that's great. And I would say Big thing is vote. That is a big thing. Vote. Elections matter. Elections matter. There were, how many provincially? I think of Lawrence. He was. I don't know how much. How much did you win by Lawrence? Where are you, Lawrence? He's running yourself. What was your margin in your victory? Do you remember? Very, very small. Okay, yeah, very. Yeah, I know that there was one that was one vote and it was turned over, and now it's going to by-election. Another one was by 4 votes. I won one time by 68 votes provincially, and then I lost by 300 votes, and then that losing this seat changed the entire government for the past I don't know how many years. So you obviously vote, but you know what? Maybe get some other people to vote too, okay? Help to be involved with that, volunteering, influencing in campaigns, events, just different ways. As we go towards the elections, those things really matter. So I know that many of you I've recognized a number of you here that have supported me in the past. I say thank you for that. But listen, even if you don't agree with me or my party, listen, get involved. Be involved in democratic process, whatever way you want to support. Just get involved, and I think that's important because we do have a power. It's not like in the old days, it's the king's there, and okay, whatever the king is, you pray for him, and then just be a good citizen. That's great. But you know what? We have a role as citizens, being informed and making sure we're voting. It does matter. Engaging, volunteering, a variety of things, the petitions, emails, and prayer. Just be involved. So there really is hope, and I believe that we still live in a beautiful country, and we're gonna just do what we can, and that's all you can do, right? You do what you can. So thank you, and I'm going to right now ask a good friend of mine, MP Tamara Jansen, with her security detail, Byron, okay? And, Tamara has just been just a passionate, strong on issues, communicating, just she's here for the right reasons, for Canada, for our young people. She's a believer also, and her and her husband had a large nursery, very large, in Langley. I think they started Glow. Yeah, Glow. You've heard that Glow right there? So there's, your son, but it was really you. So you're humble. So they've been, been in the business world. They've been, but engaged on issues, and this is not an easy job. My goodness, this is not an easy job. Back and forth and flying back and just people. I was watching the time change. Okay, so the time change. Oh, we're not going to have any more daylight saving time or whatever it is, and because they're talking about all the, the increase of mental illness and all that, how the impact. Well, listen, I go through 3-hour time change there and 3-hour time change twice. I don't know what day, up or down. I don't know what it is, but it's quite the system. So, anyways, Tamara, thank you. She's going to come and speak to her private members bill on MAID, and then I'll come and chat for a few minutes over. Please give Tamara a welcome.
Thank you so much. It's always good to see his face at 8:30 in the morning in Ottawa on Wednesdays. We do our BC caucus meeting.
Oh, yeah, well, 7 o'clock for them.
There you go. Yeah, we go. There's a nice prayer breakfast in the parliamentary restaurant it's not really a breakfast. It's coffee and hopefully a muffin. But it's pretty early. And with the time change, it makes it even worse, I got to say. But thank you very much for letting me come here, taking this time to be able to share with you something that I'm very passionate about. I'm passionate about a lot of things. You probably have noticed that if you watch me at all on social media. Having come from a business background, being concerned for people that are in business, small business, medium-sized, they're kind of like the engine of our economy. So I really want to fight for them, that they would have, a fair shot, that we get rid of a whole bunch of the regulation, red tape that's making it incredibly difficult for entrepreneurs to do well in the country. So I fight for that. But I was very blessed that right in the beginning of Parliament, we pull numbers out to see who's going to get an opportunity to put forward a private member's bill. And I got a really low number of all things. And that low number was 29, so that meant I could put forward a bill right away. Now, if you don't know who I am, I originally got involved in politics because of my local member of Parliament, Mark Warawa. And Mark Warawa was on the very first euthanasia committee that studied this situation before it came to be legal. And so I got very involved in this issue, and we watched it move through the House, and we watched it go through committee. I know we talked a lot about the concept that it could possibly become kind of like a Pandora's box. If we allowed it, we would see more and more people being impacted, especially the vulnerable. And of course, we were told at that time it would be safe, ironic, and rare. But of course, over the time, as we've seen, it has very much expanded. And currently, it's in the law that in March of 2027, it will be legal for someone solely suffering from a mental health issue would be able to qualify for MAID. And having walked with Mark Warawa on his journey, trying to, raise red flags, raise the alarms, when I had the opportunity to put in a bill, that was the bill I put in. It's exactly the same bill as my other colleague, Ed Fast, had put in the previous Parliament, which did not even get into committee stage. It was voted down. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I kind of want to, sort of give you a little bit more detail on what this is all about. So, and first of all, I want to say, I think the most important conversations don't happen in Ottawa, but it's in rooms like this, where people come together because they care deeply about their families, their neighbors, and the kind of country that we're building together. What we're discussing tonight isn't an abstract policy debate. It's about real people with real lives, and whether we still believe that as a country, every life is worth fighting for. Now, I want to begin, but not with legislation or policy, but with a story, because this issue becomes much clearer when we stop speaking in just general terms and start thinking about individuals. Now, some of you may have heard of a young man named Keanu, and his story is one that really stays with me, because it captures in a very real way what's at stake here. Now, Keanu was a 26-year-old young man struggling with very serious mental health challenges. And his situation was made even more difficult by the fact that he was losing his sight due to diabetes, something that would weigh heavily on anyone. And so he is, especially on someone who is already battling with depression. So, like many people who live with mental illness, he had periods where things felt darker than others. And his mom says, his mom, those close to him, knew that the winter months were particularly hard on him, when the weight of it all seemed to press in on him even more heavily. It's in those moments when everything feels uncertain and overwhelming, it's not unusual for hope to feel very far away. Now, at one point last year, MAID entered the picture in his mind. And this is where his story becomes so important. When Keanu's mother heard that he had been accepted by the system as qualified for MAID, she stepped in and challenged that system, and she insisted that her son was not beyond help, that he deserved care, time, and a chance to go through a period that by its very nature is unstable and deeply affected by his depression. So she stood in the gap and refused to let a temporary state become a permanent outcome. And because of her persistence, because she wouldn't accept that this was the end of his story, his life was quite literally saved at that time, and his permission was revoked. But what makes it so difficult to accept is what happened next. Just this past December, while he was once again dealing with depression, he was able to travel across the country and find a different physician Ellen Wiebe, who was willing to approve MAID. In other words, the outcome didn't hinge on a clear and certain change in his condition. It hinged on finding a provider prepared to say yes. When you step back and look at the sequence of events, it raises a question that we cannot simply ignore. What changed between those two moments? What we now know from testimony from almost every psychiatric professional is that diagnosing irremediability is accurate barely 50% of the time when it comes to mental illness. That means those diagnoses are not much better than a coin toss. And when a life depends on getting it right, that is just not acceptable. So Keanu's not a concept or a policy case. He was someone's son. Someone whose life continued at one point because someone fought for him, and whose life later ended under a system that had changed. His story forces us to examine whether we're building a system that that consistently protects the vulnerable, or one that over time becomes more permissive in ways that carry irreversible consequences. That's why I introduced Bill C218, the Right to Recover Act. The purpose of the bill is straightforward. It would ensure that MAID is not provided in cases where mental illness is the sole underlying condition. Because in those situations, the possibility of recovery, however uncertain, must still matter. It reflects a belief that our responsibility as a country isn't to determine when someone's life should end, but to ensure that every reasonable effort has been made to support them in living. And I want to give you an update as well as where this conversation is going at the national level, because it's definitely not settled. I've recently been appointed vice chair of the special committee, joint committee on medical assistance in dying. It's joint with the Senate and with the House. And this committee is now reviewing how MAID is being applied and where it's heading in the future. This was mandated, this review, and my bill is kind of running in tandem with this new committee. Last week was our first meeting. And next Tuesday, we will have our second meeting where we will have witnesses begin to give testimony. So I encourage you, if you do social media, please do follow me, and then we'll be posting things from the different committee meetings, the different testimony, because I believe, as you said, if we are engaged, if we're informed, we will make better decisions. If this stuff is done in the dark, where nobody's watching the committee meeting, which I get, it can be tedious to watch an entire 3-hour meeting. Let me tell you, when you're sitting in that committee room, time flies, because you know that people's lives are at stake. So I encourage you to follow along. So what we hope to achieve as conservatives is to demonstrate that there's no clear agreement among the experts. In fact, they are all raising serious concerns. They're telling us that we do not have the tools to make the kinds of determinations in mental illness that we would need. They're warning that the safeguards are not as strong as people assume. And they're cautioning that once we move further down this path, it will be very difficult to reverse course. At the same time, we're seeing more and more situations where people are turning to MAIDs not simply because of medical suffering, but because of circumstances, because they feel like they're a burden, because they can't access the care they need. We all know how difficult it is to get a doctor. It's even more difficult to get a psychiatrist. So someone who's suffering from depression, who's suicidal, struggles to find the care and the hope that he needs. And yet we are very easily bringing in a regime where MAID will be available very quickly for that person. So this should stop us in our tracks, because that's not what compassion looks like. Compassion does not say, we understand your suffering and we'll help you die. Compassion says, we understand your suffering and we are not going anywhere. We are going to walk with you through this. We're going to fight for you. As we consider where this is heading, I believe we have to come back to a very simple but profound question. What kind of country are we choosing to be? Are we a country that responds to suffering by expanding access to assisted death? Or are we a country that leans in and refuses to give up on people when they're at their most vulnerable? Because the truth is, the stakes here are not theoretical. We are making decisions that will determine whether someone in their darkest moment is met with support and a path forward, or with an option that ends their life permanently. We have already seen through stories like Keanu's how fragile that line can be and how much can depend not on certainty, but on circumstance. That should give us all pause. It should push us to be cautious, to be thoughtful, and ensure we protect those who need us most. And so that's why Bill C218 matters and why your voice matters. Because a country is ultimately defined by how it treats its most vulnerable. And I believe Canada must be a place that chooses care over abandonment and hope over resignation. So thank you for being here tonight, and I would generally like to hear your thoughts and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you want to go first?
Doing a dance here. Yeah, you can, or I'll bring the mic to you if there's a question right there, but I just want to make a couple points. And, we're talking about how we can influence, we can still have an influence. I know as members of parliament, Tamara's, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I was right for a second. Her bill is something that we're bringing it forward. Other private members' bills, but we also bring a lot of amendments that help, and sometimes the Liberals will take some of our, we'll take some of our ideas, and that's fine. So, it does have an impact. What you bring forward brings an impact. Just a couple points on MAID. Do you know that this year there's going to be 100,000 Canadians that have chosen MAID? And that the National Post just recently said that there is as many people that get government-assisted euthanasia in Canada as the rest of the world combined. That's the rest of the world combined. Like, this is sanctioned. Like, this is craziness. Sorry, this is craziness. And so this, and that's where it's at right now. Let alone with if you're bringing in this this whole other thing for people with disabilities and mental illness. I know that one of my staff, well, I don't know, can I mention? Okay, well, Brian, does a great job. Actually, I want my staff, you can stand up. Here's Eduardo right here, Edward. He's one of my staffers, and we've got to give him and Brian and Chelsea and Carly, and I'm missing one, Linda's not here, but just do a great job, and that's who does a lot of the work. But thank you so much for what you're doing, and also want to say thank you to all the volunteers that were involved here. There's a number of you. Thank you so much, whether it be parking or security or sound, a variety of things. Thank you. But going to Brian, you had a I can't remember, was it a concussion or something like that, and yeah, a number of them. And I don't know how many times they told you, oh, how about MAID? They're offering him, assisted suicide. He said no. But how many times is this happening? And he's doing a great job working for me. I just really appreciate what he's doing. And I think of myself, I had went through a dark time 40 years ago, suicidal thoughts and hopelessness. And you know what? That's a distant memory. There's real hope, as you mentioned. It's a coin flip as far as people recovering or not. So anyways, those that are pastors, we have a number of pastors. Can you just stand Dwayne, I know there's others too. Can you just wave? Yeah, thank you so much. There's a number of you. Can we give and I know there's others too. Blade right there, pastor right there. Yeah, thank you for that. And then church leaders. Listen, there's church leaders here. There's others. We just want to recognize you for that, the volunteers. So thank you. So I'm going to now pass it to you. Go ahead. And then.
Mark mentioned Brian, and I was also going to mention Brian, because often legislation doesn't impact you until you know somebody who it impacts. And Brian is a member of our staff. I met him during the election about a year ago. And he is disabled. He goes through a lot of struggles and pain on a daily basis and works through them. But he has become such a meaningful member of our team. And to go back to what you said, MP Jansen, what kind of a country do we live in where we take a wonderful young man who has so much to contribute and we offer him death? That we give up on him and his abilities. And I'm so grateful that he has risen above that and he takes each day as it comes. Yeah, I think it's totally worth it. So appreciate that Brian lets us share that, but maybe that will touch each of you in your hearts when you think about the expansion, that, come to our office and meet Brian, and I think he's a poster child for why this legislation is wrong. Tonight is about hope. And our community gave hope to a bill that was the natural health products, as many of you may have been involved in. That seemed to cross party lines, and we worked diligently, and that bill has been paused. So when you leave here today and you sign the petitions, if you want, I hope that we have inspired you for hope. And many of you submitted questions, and that's what we're going to do now. So I'm hoping both the MPs can come up, and we'll take some of the questions. Yeah, there actually isn't. A lot of the questions were quite repetitive, so they're good questions. They're all good questions. but they were quite repetitive. So I think I have about 9 questions, and I know that some of you may have come prepared with questions you want to ask each of the MPs individually. So you can always do that.
That's good.
Okay, so either one of you can let me know how you want to answer, and I'll just pass the mic. Maybe both of you will want to answer the question. What is the real agenda driving these bills? Do you want to start with you?
Well, Bill C2, or like we're talking about the euthanasia bill? Okay, so I'm going to talk about that one because that one's big for me, and then you can do C9. For me, what I understand is the opposition, or I'm the opposition, but the other side is very forceful about autonomy. They want to make sure that individuals have autonomy. But they forget the fact that there are vulnerable people who rely on people daily for help. That doesn't make them less of a person. That makes them someone who is who is someone that we can all learn to work together with. And so they're not able to be completely autonomous. They actually have to have help. And I think if we're able-bodied, we should never think that, well, we would never want to live like that. We should think, what can I do to help? Because I become a better person when I understand and walk in someone else's shoes. So the autonomy argument is incredibly forceful. They think everybody should be able to decide for themselves, but I think even with addiction, these people are needing help and care. And so therefore, autonomy isn't a good argument from my perspective.
Great. I can guess what the agenda, what their motivation is, but I'd rather not. I think I'd just rather go on what they're actually doing. How it's impacting people's freedoms, how it is. So I think that's what we focus on. And I mentioned some of these different bills. So it's, but there does need to be a trend to that undermines your rights, your freedoms, your liberties. Whether in so many different domains. There's one lady here that was approached by police. Now this is probably directed by my Facebook post. That was fine, and it's kind of like, now that's just kind of, and I know the story, but we're seeing a lot of that in England. A lot of hate crime, lots like that. They can't focus on serious crime. There's a lot of serious crimes happening. Like the crime wave is really gone out of control. I mean, no, police, I won't say out of control. Our police are doing they're doing a great job, but at the same time, they can only do with what the laws allow them to do. And so they're limited as far as catch and release. They have to abide by the laws. So it just hats off to the police. So, yeah.
I am interested in learning about how C9 might potentially impact Christians who are involved in social causes. I am also interested in learning how the Liberal government went about stopping the continued debate on Bill C9.
Ooh, that one's really tricky. That's all, the guys that have been in Parliament longer than me understand the little tricks and strategies that they can use. But they were able to cut off debate through a vote. We're in opposition, so we don't have the upper hand. They can always beat us in pretty much everything. So we just have to be very good communicators and make sure that we continue to raise our voices. And I think over C9, you can see that it's been very, very successful. I understand at least 100,000 phone calls were made by many people across Canada to their local MPs about this issue. And just so you know, even, I believe it's on Monday that we're going to do that final third reading vote, which is it not Monday? Anyways, the next phase, it'll go to Senate. So don't stop making your phone calls. This time you're going to be directing them at the Senate. The challenge that we have is because MP Mark Miller was so clear on what he felt was criminal in the scriptures, it's fairly clear where they intend to go with this bill by removing those protections that were there. So, I hear so many people say, oh, it's no big deal. It's no big. It is actually a big deal. And thank you to everybody that has been making phone calls and responding, sharing and getting engaged, because you do and have made the difference.
Yes, it is a hot topic for them. Also in the multicultural groups, whether it be Chinese or Filipino or the among the Sikhs or among there actually is maybe there are many groups and different faiths that are speaking up on this. So that, but at the same time, it's like they're really pushing on this. It's kind of crazy. Now, part of it may have to do with a vote. By-election in Quebec. So with the Bloc Québécois, maybe they're trying to show that they're really serious about it. I don't know, but I am speaking to the bill. It's being reported on Monday, and speaking to it then, and then on Wednesday. It's a process.
That actually answered this question, but I'm going to read it anyway because this person was concerned we weren't going to read their question. Does your advocacy protect all religions or just your own? i.e., are you advocating for Muslims, Sikhs, etc., or just Christians? And if so, how?
Here is a good opportunity for me to plug my social media. I have absolutely been advocating for all faiths, for all religions, because if I believe that religious freedom is for me, it is also for my neighbor. I'm to love my neighbor as myself. If you go on my social media, you'll be able to see the different interventions I've done. I spoke also at committee, so I did a 10-minute long one, but I cut those up into small versions for you to watch. In my riding, I have a lot of different people. I have many, I think 30% South Asians. My very best friend is Hindu background. I've got lots of Muslim friends. And I truly believe that we are living in a pluralistic society, and we need to protect our neighbors from this kind of pressure. And when I think about Daniel did a great job when he was in Babylon, standing up even for the sorcerers, because that was his duty.
Yeah, there's 350 Muslim organizations that have written letters and against this legislation. That's just the Muslim community. There's also, here's a few other groups that would be, I would call them exactly, the Canadian Labour Congress, the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs, Canadians for Justice and Peace for the Middle East. These aren't exactly strong conservative, backing organizations, but the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association, there's a Center for Free Expression. There are the Democracy Watch, the Independent Jewish Voices, there's Toronto Palestinian Families, there's just lists and lists of organizations that are across different political spectrums that are speaking up on this issue. It's important.
Okay. If religious freedom means the right to live according to one's beliefs, shouldn't it also include the right to make end-of-life decisions like MAID?
Well, as you can see, I believe that many people are caught in the net of compassion. Many people call it compassion, that are actually being coerced into accepting MAID. They are not in a power position. The doctor, the psychiatrist, they are in a power position with someone who is vulnerable. And so I believe very strongly, and that is why I put this bill forward, that we need to protect the most vulnerable in our society, and that is especially for those who are struggling with mental health issues.
And what's concerning is this, is that it is easier to get MAID than it is to get palliative care. To get that type, it's just, it's like it's being pushed among veterans, among others. It's like it's almost become, well, it's just a natural thing, and it becomes societal. Like, well, okay, well now, it's just very disturbing, the direction that we're going and how it's become normalized, and it's. So that is concern, but I mean, at the same time, Supreme Court of Canada has made rulings on this, and we're doing what we can do right now, which is on legislation before us, which is the people with disabilities and with mental health. We're fighting that battle right now.
Let me just make a slight change. It is only for people with mental illness that this bill covers. Those with disabilities are already accepted as eligible.
Yeah, the disability organizations were very strongly against that, yeah.
With what you are seeing in Parliament, do you think people will soon be jailed for their speech?
Well, it depends. If you listen to the Liberals, that will never happen. I mean, that's our concern. Mark Miller specifically said, I think it was Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Romans, there are passages in there that he believes judges should be able to press charges. And so I don't see any other way of looking at it, but that someone could go to jail at some point in time if this goes through.
So it's erosion of rights, religious rights. So, and then what happens? Courts make decisions based upon previous ruling, and then it becomes a cascade. And so, so those are in so many different things, and we're seeing that in lots of things. So decisions made now have repercussions. I don't think that 30 days from now, if it does pass, which that they're going to be coming out and hauling people to prison. I don't believe that, but I do believe that give it time and see what happens. And it's like, where things are at now, if you looked at 15 years ago, it's like, what's going on here? There's so many different things. So time goes by quickly. And so these things are major milestones in a negative way.
Has the requirement for Attorney General consent for the charges under C9 been removed from the final version of C9 approved by the Justice Committee? And maybe can you expand on that?
I did talk about that. If they would have changed it, it would have been on the Friday after we left and all that. So it would have, I don't think so. I don't believe that has been changed, no.
I believe there were some good amendments made, but still very bad.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay, and our last question tonight is that Bill C9 has been sold as a bill against hate speech. Is it just a bill against hate speech?
No, I think it's about all, like I said, this impacts all your rights. It impacts your freedom of speech. And then freedom of speech also has to, not just your speaking, but what you're putting out there online or in the press. So it ties in with everything. There's an erosion right here. So it is of great concern.
They even changed the definition, like the wording of the definition of hate speech so that it had a lower bar. So that's the challenge you'll hear the Liberals say, oh, don't you worry. This is what we're saying, don't you worry. And we've seen that before where they say, well, just check our website. It's like, no, it needs to be clarified in the law because websites change. Laws do not without going through Parliament. So the fact that they even, wanted to lower the bar on what is considered hate speech, and then they throw back at us, oh, well, you want to see hate symbols like swastikas all over the place, which is nonsense. What we're looking for is ensuring that those religious freedom rights that we have had in there are once again put back in the bill. So let's hope Senate, which is supposed to be what's the saying? The sober second thought, that Senate will do something. But it's going to be very interesting because we know we've had a lot of senators who were appointed as independent senators in the last while. And keep your eyes on that because that's going to be a very interesting discussion.
Okay,
So as we start to wrap up this evening, again, we would love it if you fill out one of our feedback forms. We read every one of your feedbacks on the newsletter, good and bad. I have the bad ones taped to my desk. We read them all, and we do take all of your feedback to heart. We've done a number of community forums, but your ideas are always looked at as to what you're interested in, what you want your MP to know. So please, if you could take the time. If you don't want to stick around and fill it out, take it home. Email us the answers, phone us. We're there for you. And that's right, postage is always free to your MP office. If you want to stick around and have a conversation with the MPs, they're going to hang around for a little bit. But thank you again for your time and for all coming out on such an ugly evening. Thank you so much, and we appreciate your engagement.